Hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. I'm your host, Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that's dedicated to all things about mobile accessible gaming. And through our interview series, we interview game developers, accessibility influencers, as well as accessibility advocates. And this week, we're welcoming back Mike Walter. And you might say, I don't remember ever hearing you interview Mike Walter. Well, we did interview him last week, had a great hour-long conversation that did not record. So Mike was generous enough to come back this week to try this all again. Does seem that the recording is working, so I'm excited about that. So Mike, welcome back once again.
Thanks for having me.
So Mike, what I always like to do right here at the beginning is give you a chance to just introduce yourself to the community and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Excellent. So my name's Mike Walter. I'm a parent of two and a math teacher. And I started writing as a hobby about 11 years ago. And since then have made eight choose your own adventure style type interactive fiction games. And the one that we're gonna mostly talk about today is Lost Heir, which was a trilogy of 3 games.
So when you say 8, is Lost Heir 3 of those 8, or is Lost Heir, or are you talking like 8 different IPs?
I consider Lost Heir 3 of the 8.
Okay.
They were individually over 100,000 words each. So
right. Yeah, and Lost Heir, which we'll get into, is kind of fantasy RPG type of game. What are kind of the themes of the other 5 games?
So fantasy has always been my go-to. I love reading that stuff. So my first one was Life of a Wizard, very much fantasy setting. My second one actually was sci-fi, paradox factor, some time travel. Third one, Life of a Mobster, so into some crime and real world crime. Well, not real world, very mafia, Sopranos, Goodfellas type of crime. And then I got into the Lost Heir. So 1, 2, and 3, all full fantasy, everything you can think of fantasy style, from dragons to swords and magic. After that, I had another fantasy short title of, well, not short, but a single title, The Last Wizard. And then my latest game that released last year was Life of a Space Force Captain, which was back to futuristic science fiction.
So I have played Life of a Mobster, so I enjoyed that. It made me feel like I was in the middle of Goodfellas, being Henry Hill there. And then I have had on my list of ones that I really want to get to is Life of a Space Ship Captain. That one sounded like it was really interesting from the title, so I'm excited to play that one. That's going to be on my list coming here in the next little bit. So kind of a variety there of different things that you're doing, science and fantasy. That's exciting. What made you tell the Lost Heir story specifically, and also it seems like the other ones are kind of one-offs for the most part. What made you tell the story and be like, this is going to be a 3-part trilogy?
So it was after the Life of a Wizard, which was the first game when I didn't know anything what I was doing, but it seemed to be really well received. People enjoyed it a lot. So, and I've always liked fantasy, but I wanted more story in it. Life of a Wizard, very gamey, which was fine. It was fun and has story all the way through it. But I wanted more story, more characters, love interest, developing characters. And being having a Dungeons and Dragons background back when I had time before family, I love that sort of stuff and fantasy books. So Lost Heir, that was sort of my goal. Was I wanted more story. It's kind of like playing D&D at home, or at least that feel where you have full agency. You can literally be any type of class and that you can think of, and probably that you can't think of. It was turned into a really, really big branching game by the end.
So the world of Daria, I mean, it is a pretty rich. It's got a lot of lore behind it. Did you just kind of write the lore as you went along, or did you spend a lot of time, pre-production before you even started the game of building, what is this world and what are the opposing factors, and what's the history that's led us to this point of the storyline?
So when I did Life of a Wizard, I was sort of all my 3 life of stories. I really like to leave nothing off the table, put everything I could think of into it, like wizard style in that case. So I'm sorry, so I got a little distracted there. So can you repeat your question?
I just said, now how much world building did you have to do basically before you started the game?
Sorry, that was it. Yes. So from Life of Wizard, I started with that idea and getting all those little pieces in, and then when I went into Lost Heir, I liked the idea of going back to that same fantasy world. So I actually had to go back and take better notes of what I had said and sort of to make it more cohesive. And then I started building from there. But the nice, just the nature of the story, where you start with yourself. I could build it slowly, but definitely I recorded things as I went. And then I started, I'd have some free time, be walking the dog and be thinking about the world. And, oh, wouldn't that be cool if that could take place? And I'd slip some ideas in. So it was definitely, it grew and grew and grew as it went.
The like, again, those kind of the other five games seem to be one-off type of games. What was kind of structurally different about building a game that didn't end at the first game and went on to game two, and then carried things over from game one, and then game three that's taken things over from game one and two? Like, how was that structurally or coding wise different for you to kind of build that world that kind of kept on going?
The big thing I wanted to make sure I did was make every choice valid. I didn't want to have anything where it was like, oh, but in my part one, I did this, and now you're. So it was really important to me that absolutely every choice ever made was the story, was your story, was a totally valid one. So it definitely meant when I was at the end of Lost Heir 1, I did set it up, and now not to give any spoilers, but it does end in a way that seems very distinct. You end up going off in a very certain direction of your choice, and then to write the next story starting from that choice, which is very individual, bringing it back in to keep the story going, but making sure that every single choice was valid. That was probably my biggest. Actually, keeping track of all the stats and all that, kind of felt like I would do through a normal game. As I go through the game myself, play testing, I see at this point in the game, you should have all of these various options. And so by the end of the game, there are just more options that you're going off from.
So, you mentioned kind of the structure there of, you go out, you get to the end of game one, everybody's kind of headed off in their own directions. But in game two, you kind of have to bring people back. So, to kind of continue that story. So it's not forever branching out into the future. What I found pretty interesting about your game is that can feel very repetitive, and like I'm seeing the same thing when you're going through multiple playthroughs, but you get to customize your particular character in so much detail that you really feel like I am approaching the scene. I've kind of seen this, major scene beat before, but you really get to approach it in a completely different way that makes it feel fresh in playing, through the game multiple times. Plus, as you said, those kind of interludes of where you kind of go off in your own direction and you're kind of chasing down a particular individual quest that you might go, that also adds a lot of freshness that makes you want to come back and be like, well, what if I didn't go to the Wizard Tower and I instead went into the forest and tried to help rescue that person? Or what if I went to this other location and tried to do this other thing? So it makes you want to come back and try it several different times to kind of see those different endings. So I imagine that was very successful in it, but I imagine it was very difficult to make the game feel fresh on multiple playthroughs and get people to come back and want to play multiple times. So, was that really in your mind as you were building the game? Like, how do I make this, fresh for each person? And as you said, make it each person's own unique playthrough.
That's right. So one paragraph of story later in the game from the coding end, from my end, is enormous. There's so many options of what could be happening in a single scene, depending upon your previous choices. They can be enormous things. You're totally different. You're in a different place, a different people. But even the smaller things, to have a person with you that was different from the last time you played, totally changes a scene. The way that you're perceived, what you've done in the past, can change a scene, from small things to big things. But all those little things all build to it. And when I make my choices,
whether that person next to you likes you or not, could make a big difference. Taking along somebody who's mad at you for something versus who adores you.
That's right. And it might seem like a small thing, but even just that flavor of that scene, now the tone of the scene and how it started up, will entirely change it.
So, for those who don't know, before I kind of want to go to my next part, Lost Heir specifically, why don't you just give it like the elevator pitch of what that general story is, and then I have a follow-up question that goes on with that.
Sure. So it starts off, it's very similar to my life of games in that I like starting very young. So you start off as a child. I don't think it entirely pins down the age exactly, but a young teen, even slightly preteen perhaps. And a terrible tragedy occurs. And I think it's fair to say that it's not too surprising, but something terrible happens to your royal family that you do end up, you are the lost heir. So you become lost to the kingdom, going into hiding. The big bad villain and his henchmen are out there. And so in the first book, especially, it's that real feeling that you are building yourself from nothing. You've come, you're a child that has been loosed on the world. Depending upon your choices, you have a guardian with you who will protect you and set you up. And also, depending upon those choices, how you end up starting your young adult life. Whether you're just about anything is possible, whether you decide to be more academic as a scribe, you'd like to help people as a town guard, you'd like to just steal from people, you're the town thief, you're and a lot of your regular classes and ideas, your fantasy tropes, you'll find them in there, especially in the first book. And then as it starts to branch off and you start to specialize and you start to make your own customizations, away it goes.
Yeah, so when you start off, and particularly when you're starting off as a kid, you are not formed yet. And where I was going to go is you have a whole bunch of different stats that you track through this process, and those stats are going to decide whether someone helps you later on based off your relationship with them, or you have enough strength to knock down the door, or you have enough magic to kill the enemy. And all those stats as a child kind of start out, relatively neutral. You have average strength and average, magic skills or whatever you have. And then through those choices, not only specifically, I want to go train as a wizard, but just decisions that you make might add to, you tried out some, magical offensive way to handle a situation, and you become successful in that, and increases, so that now the more you kind of use magic, the more powerful magic has. So tracking all of that, all of these different stats, relationships, who's alive, who's dead, what's your strength, what's your arcane, what's your ability with swords or bows, or the various different tools that you can use, along with all the branching paths that eventually develop from choices that you make. How did you possibly keep all of that where you didn't end up with dead ends or things that just didn't work out, or paths that weren't even possible, that you wanted to be possible but you screwed it up and no one could ever become the arcane wizard because they could never amass enough points because you didn't put enough points in the game for them to ever actually get there. Like, how did you ensure that it all worked?
So on a lighter side, what I do is as I'm designing the game, certain sort of pivot points, I'll try to figure out what my stat ranges are. So if somebody has never picked this, it can be as low as that. Somebody is really specialized it could be as high as that. So I do make little stat blocks where each stat from a lowest to a maximum. And then when the choices come, I try to make that fit in. Now, you're absolutely right. That doesn't always work. And I've definitely come across spots in the game where during beta testing where it turns out, oh, that little segment of game that I thought was so neat, no one's ever commenting on it. And I'll ask about it and like, oh, we never saw that. Dig a bit deeper and say, oh, yep, you're right. You would never find that because it did have this cross. So it got a lot of play testing after that yet.
How many play testers did you have go through the game?
So about that's a good question. It was about 100, just about 100.
Oh, wow.
So I've been very fortunate there. I keep my beta testing a little. There's different ways to run it, and I know different people have different feelings on that. So I've always kept mine. What I like to do is just invite a few people in at a time, sort of a first wave, get those fresh eyes on it, catch those fresh errors. My worry always is that if I just wide open it, I'll get the same error 100 times. They'll play it a bit, But this way, I can fix those errors, let in a few more people, another 5 or 10 people, fix them. And by growing that, I always have that nice set of fresh eyes in it. And I've been very fortunate that people have been wonderful to help me. And yeah, probably I think I did it. It got was approaching 100 people, and these were people who would email me to say, yeah, I'd like to try it out, send them the link, play it a bit, and then hopefully send me back some feedback and sort of say those types of things. I liked it when this happened. Ooh, I never got to there. And of course, the big ones are this broke. So trying to make sure that nothing got sent out with errors in it.
Do you ever send out any of the beta testers with like missions like, look, beta tester number one, I'd really want you to just play an evil character, just do all the evil things. I want to see how that works. Like, do you ever, or do you just let them free reign and do what they please?
So I do let them free reign, and I figure with that many people, I'm hoping I'm hitting most of those styles. Now, when I do my own play testing through that, I definitely do that, and I'll try an evil run and a good run, and I'll try one with certain directions, which does definitely aim for things that way. And that's a good example, the evil good route, because it changes so many little things and so many options and what's happening.
To give people a flair for the variety that can happen here. You have at the end of game 3, there's an achievement. So there's achievement like become all these specializations. So it's like become a dragon rider, become a luck mage, become a weapons master, and there's over, I think, 50 different specializations that you can do based off of the points you get from choices you make, finding particular side quests or gear that helps you achieve those goals, or just through the process of when you get an opportunity to train, you keep concentrating on being a wizard and keep doing all things wizard so that you can become that arcane mage or whatever the case may be. The endings, I think, you could correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's over 10 different endings. Is that right?
Yes. So the endings in the Lost Heir right up to the end, yeah, it does. It branches off, and even those endings sort of have sub endings within them.
Right.
So, yep.
So, it's just such an expansive game that it really gives you reason to come back and do different things. And I asked you this last time, with that many different ways, if I'm a person just like, I really want to know how to become a dragon rider. I did not see that option. I didn't see where I ran into a dragon. I'm not sure how I get that. Is there any sort of walkthrough for your game of, what do I need to do to, achieve some of these goals or find some of these items?
So I've never made any guides or walkthroughs myself, but there are a lot out there, especially for Lost Heir, where people have developed just these amazing guides with such specific details. So I like the achievement system and showing the stats early for that reason, because it puts that idea out there. Oh, this was a possibility. And I hope it does draw people to say, okay, well, next time I'm going to go down that dark path to talk to that witch to learn about the whatever, as opposed to, so keeping those. And then when I have those options, I figure it's never a waste to put more options, because it sort of does that double effect. It gives you more agency as the player, and it gives you more replayability. So it might not help you so much, but even as you're playing, it's like, I could do those things, which feels nice. And then afterwards, if you wish, you could try it.
There's also, besides that, I guess it sort of plays into it, but as you play through the game, as you were saying, if you volunteer for the guards to assist with the town guards, you start building levels of being a guardsman. So you'll start with level 1 and you'll go up, to level 2 to the level 3. So the more you do it, the more skills you do that. You keep doing ranger things and hunting game and setting traps and stuff like that. Your ranger skill goes up. And those have checks as well later in the game that, you would be able to find the tracks of the enemy if your ranger skill was 3 or higher, but yours is only 2, so you did not do that. And one of the reasons that you needed a ranger skill 3 is a great feature I like at the beginning, where you say, do you want to turn on notifications? And what turning on notifications does is, when you fail something or don't get one of the choices, it tells you, well, you needed ranger skill 3 and strength above 50 in order to get a paragraph that you're not seeing. So it kind of gives you, again, well, next time I come back, I'm going to make sure when I get to this point, I have Ranger skill 3 and strength over 50, so I can see whatever that choice is that I'm not getting, which I really liked that notification feature.
Oh, and that was me too. I like that style. It's interesting hearing and talking to other players, like because some will turn it off and they'll play it entirely as a book. But I've always been the other way too. I like to see those numbers for what I'm getting. I feel that little sense of joy. Oh, I'm getting stronger at that, and that's a big nice feeling for games like that. And then mosquito, and then yeah. So having that in is definitely I like the numbers. When I was making some of the others, like Last Wizard, I took those numbers back out again. I was trying a different style to make it more book-like. And I often wonder when people play, do they know that these other options are there? You played it that way, but it could be quite different another go.
Or even without it, it's kind of like you don't even know that there was a decision made there that, you know what I mean? It's just straight up, you don't know the behind the scenes that you actually made a choice early on that affected it here. Would you say throughout the world you get some side opportunities, whether it be a side quest or you decide to explore something and you have enough stats to unlock certain items, you can get yourself like a magical belt or a magical cape or a special spell book. Would you say those are like the most powerful items to end up getting it? Because I found like those for me seemed, or maybe they just get referenced more, that now your magical belt is helping you out, or now you get to use the special spell book to pass this section. Do you think those are kind of the most powerful type of items in the game, or the most game changing when you're able to get your hands on one of those by defeating a boss or finding a special item on a side quest?
Yeah, I think so. I call them artifacts in the game, and that is sort of the goal, is to make these like really special once you found them. This is a really good reward for having navigated a certain scene in some unique way. So definitely they are game changers, because some of those options that can show up with different ones can do some really big things. And some of those artifacts, they are ongoing. A belt of speed, that's going to help you a few different times. Another types of artifacts are one-timers, and if it's a one-time use on, I tried to make that even bigger. So you likely will get a pretty special effect out of it, a pretty neat story when you choose to use it.
Right. Those were the ones I was always scared to use, because I'm like, it might be better to use it later. Like maybe I shouldn't use it now. So I'll hold on to those quite long. So an interesting thing, we were kind of talking about stat checks and having options, and special items and having options. We talked about this last time a little bit about the behind the scenes coding. So you're in a storyline. You get to, you're whatever, I'm going to make something up. You've approached a castle, and at the bottom you'll have some options. Now, depending on certain stats like your strength, if your strength happens to be over 70, there'll be an option down there that says break down the door, or actually I should say, it probably has break down the door anyway, and you need, if you choose that, you'd have to have a score over 70 to actually break down the door. You might have something like where you picked up special lockpicks, and now an option has appeared that wasn't there before because you're holding the lockpicks. It'll say, do you want to use your lockpicks? And you have some options there. So there's kind of, as you kind of play through, and I didn't realize this until I played through a couple times, that like, there might be some options that are just kind of hidden until I have either the item or the stats to have that option appear, which suddenly made me realize like there's a lot more choices that are available. I was just coming back expecting at this point in the story I have 1 of 3 choices, and that's what I'm going to see. But when I came back, playing the game 3 or 4 times, I realized, sometimes there's 3 choices, sometimes there's 6 choices, sometimes there's 5 choices. It's all kind of dependent on the various stats that I've built up and what options are available to me. Now I've seen that done in other games, and a lot of times they'll have like, okay, well there's 6 options, and 3 of them are grayed out because you don't have the stats, and then you can only press 1, 2, or 3. I'm interested in your choice of actually having them hidden. Do you feel like that makes it more mysterious of playing through the game for people to come back and do it multiple ways?
Yeah, I think so. It's little Easter eggs, little moments that make your playthrough feel special. This wouldn't have happened maybe most other times, which does make writing them interesting. I think of things like the assassin route. If you It's a little difficult to become an assassin. There's some specifics involved, but once you have it, you become the assassin. You start getting jobs. You'll find yourself in some city somewhere, and suddenly, oh, now I'm getting approached to make a little extra money if I go kill somebody as an assassin. Just using that as an example. So you definitely have some brand new ones, and sometimes things like that would work the ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect. You'd be in, like you said, a fight or a scenario, and something that no one else could do, so it does show up. And even that whole system was new for Lost Heir for me. I really found it different because what I did with the Life of a Wizard, getting my tongues.
Yeah.
So my first one, it did have that. It was a lot more. Basically, you can pick the things you are able to do and grade out things that you couldn't. Whereas with the Lost Heir, I tried to make it more, you can pick a lot of things, even if you're not good at it. And you might have some a bad thing happen. It wouldn't work out the way you'd expect it to.
Right.
Maybe just a simple fail.
Like if you're a mage and you suddenly I'll use my sword, that might not work out so great.
That's right. So if you've never used your sword before up to that moment, and suddenly you're drawing out this sword you found, it's probably not going to go too well for you.
There's actually another piece that's interesting too, talking about like stats and stuff like that, which is at the beginning you can choose whether to have the legacy perk, which gives you throughout the story some boost to your stats, also some special storyline that goes along with it, which I kind of put it as kind of like RPG training wheels, for the person who's kind of more interested in seeing the story and maybe actually being able to see some of these different 50 different options that you can get to. Just allows them to do it a little bit more easy. So tell me your thoughts about that legacy perk and why offer it at the beginning.
So I dragged my feet for a long time with the option of an in-app purchase. I didn't really care for the idea at all, but I had a lot of people, a lot of readers, a lot of friends saying, it'd be really nice if you would put like a cheat menu or a god mode in, so I can do this fancy stuff. And I really didn't like the idea that I put in these extra bonuses, and the only way you could reach parts of the story then is to pay. It's such an EA way to do it. EA Games is famous. There's lots of memes out where you have to spend extra to get the details that is already in the game. They've already made it. They just withhold it for more money. Right. So I really didn't want this to look in any way like a money grab, because it really wasn't. The game was done. I was really happy with the trilogy, but I had a lot of people asking for it. So I made a really conscious effort to give what I think is a really full, involved story with it. And again, had the extra fun of tying back a previous game, which doesn't matter. You didn't ever have to have played Life of a Wizard, but that is the connection. And then the Legacy Advantage will give you the perks, and it nicely labels, here's your perk number 2, here's your perk number 3. And it progresses through not just the first game, but all 3, but then having that overlaying story, which I think gives it just another little added bonus to give this nice overarching brand new story that you hadn't seen before, that has ways to affect the existing story, but also quite unique.
So let's talk about the building of this as a game. So the program that you use to do this is a text adventure game, and you are using the choice script program, which I've talked to several developers about that. So tell me a little bit your experience about using choice script, your background in coding, if any, and how I don't know, maybe like the pros and cons of choice script. Where is it really helpful? Where is it kind of difficult to work with?
Sure. So I've always had an interest in coding. I started way back. This will really date me, but we had a VIC 20 growing up, and it was wonderful, and I learned BASIC and saving things to the cassette, to the data set, to the cassette drive. So way back. My dad helped me with it, and he was not a coder, but he was interested in it. So really, we got into it there. Years later, when I was in university, my friends and I were starting to get into multi-user dungeons, MUDs, which is the first MMO type games, which were text adventure based, which was kind of neat. And in that time, we started one up, Eye of the Storm, and it was pretty popular considering we were just a bunch of guys fooling around on weekends while we went to school. And I was mostly I really got into the story side of it. I like to make the areas. They were into building up the actual game itself and the classes and all that kind of thing. And then I'd run the stories through it. So, and then as I mentioned, I'm a teacher, math teacher, family. So life got busy. No more games, no more coding, no more anything. Um, but then I stumbled across this. Well, the first one was Choice of a Dragon, and I stumbled across this one years ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I think that's their first one. Choice Script's first game was Choice of the Dragon.
It was, and it was a neat little game. And then about I don't know, maybe a year, I'm not sure what the timing is, later, they started promoting, well, if you'd like to make a game like this, here's how you could do it, and we could set you up so you can distribute your game. And at that point, I'd written a couple games for free just because they're fun to do in some other systems. And so Choice Script, I'll give it a try. And I hid. I didn't tell anyone I did it. My wife even joked. She says she took away my Xbox. Kids and that, not really. But we lost the game system. So what am I doing now? Well, I'm over on the computer doing something. Turns out I was writing a game. So I wrote the entire game in secrecy. I didn't want to tell anyone. I was really shy, nervous about it.
Sure.
And then I released it, and it did well. And that was with Choice Script. Choice Script, like you mentioned, is it's a scripting language. So it had a lot of my all my coding background was perfect to fall right into it. But at that point in stage of my life, I don't know any other languages. Back in the day, there was BASIC, Pascal, and Modula 3 was sort of my school languages. But I just fell away from it. So
Sure.
when the scripting language came to me, it was perfect. It was so much. It's a very gentle way to code.
Did you consider, besides Choice Script, did you consider Twine or any other places that allow you to kind of create games and give you a lot of flexibility?
So originally, not at all. I didn't even know this was a thing. Actually, it might not have been entirely a thing. This was 11 years ago.
Right.
I looked it up once. I was still among the first games that Choice Script started to host, which was kind of neat. I was right in the forefront there. So I'd already made some free ones just in some fun sort of, I don't even know, they're not even real systems anymore. But as the years went on, I started developing more games. I've definitely considered it because it would be put more control to a certain extent. I'd have more of the share of the profits, I suppose, but I'd have a lot more work too. Choice Script is a wonderful company. They really are. They've grown with me. They've come a long ways. I think back to where they started 11 years ago and where they are now, night and day as well. But they will. So I'll make my game, typing it up, putting it all in, and then they package it. So it's because of them that it can go on to Apple and Google and Amazon and into all the different systems. And as the different devices update, now I'm onto Steam, which was a huge achievement to get that going. And it's been wonderful. I can write my games, and then when the game's done, I can move on to the next game. I don't have to spend as much time. Oh, this one doesn't work because I don't know. Galaxy Samsung made a brand new thing, and they need a new picture for it now.
Right.
Let somebody else handle all that.
So obviously lots of pros that you mentioned there. I mean, what are some of the challenges with working with Choice Script? Is there things that features that you wish they had that they don't, or?
So early on, I felt there were more. I think because I've been using it for so long, I've adapted to their philosophy, and that's how they coded it. But I was definitely lacking a few things that I thought would have been nice. Now, as the years have gone on, he's actually come back to it. Now he's broadening it, and he's starting to put more things into it. Probably the biggest, I think, not lack, but quirk of the system is the way random numbers work. If I have a scene and I say just something real easy, random variable 1 or 2. Okay, if it's a 1, it's daytime. If it's 2, it's nighttime. Tell the story. So you think that should work pretty smooth. But if you go to your stats system, stats page, and then come back and you had that randomization in that set, it'll re-randomize as it replays the scene. And so you'll go to your stat and come back, oh, it's nighttime now. Oh, it's daytime now. Well, obviously you can't have that.
It's refreshing the page, basically.
That's right. And so, and I get the reason for that was to set up this stats page that is independent of the story. Of, there's a lot of technical coding reasons why that went that way. So I found workarounds through the years. So all I really had to do was, okay, I'll have my random event occur earlier, have a choice in between, and then display what actually happened. You can check your page and come back. Oh, it's always night now because actually it randomized earlier.
Right. We talked about this a little because I was asking you about random numbers from a combat standpoint of, let's say, you get the option to break down the door as long as you have a strength over 70. I believe right now, as long as your strength's over 70, you will always be successful breaking down the door, as opposed to 70 allows you to generate a random number that's better, to have a better chance to break down the door. So that random number right now, at least in Lost Heir, doesn't factor into actual combat. It's static. You either have the number or you don't have the number. There's not a chance of variability in that success, even if you have the stats to attempt it.
Yep, that's right. So, which is a fun way to do it, and it's two schools of thought, and different players really like different things. So with Lost Heir, that was the goal. If you make all the same choices in your story, and you get all the way through all 3 games up to that pivotal moment, you'll be sitting in exactly the same spot. You'll have all the same stats because there is no random in the big moments in anything real. There are a few random spots through, but it's more just for entertainment. It's just nothing serious. Now, that said, I've thought about writing more of the like a fighting fantasy style game books, which are very randomized. As you build your skills, you become better at doing a certain thing, which is a really tempting way to go, because it would make it that you could make a story then that could split in any moment. But you'll have some players that they think that idea is great. They love it. It's more like a game. And others that, no, I made this choice. I want that result. It have to have that very direct agency. Like if I do this, I get that. There's no question about it. So it really is. It's 2 types of game, I think, is what it comes out to. And I keep thinking about and have dabbled a little in more of a random versions of these types of games.
I think I think what I, me personally, I like the idea of the randomness, but I also want to be informed clearly of what happened. So a lot of in choice script, like things just happen. You don't really know. Again, that's why I love your notification. If you're letting me know, like, well, you didn't have the stats to get there. If it was okay, your strength is, over 15, that gives you a +2 to the random number we're going to roll. We roll a 10, you get a +2. You needed a 13, so you fail. As long as it was kind of clear that I rolled something, I did get improvement, but I didn't get there, or I did get there. As long as it's kind of communicating it to me, I would be fine with that, because then I would at least understand what happened. If I'm not understanding, wait, why did I win last time and I didn't win this time? That would be frustrating to me. So as long as I'm informed, I like the randomness.
Yes, I totally agree. And well, I've got a lot of future ahead of me. I'm not planning to slow down on my game developing. I just love it. I just love making these things. So I think I will end up with one eventually, and I would very much make it clear because I totally agree. I think especially if you have that random in there, you have to know. And my work in progress folder is enormous. I have so many partially started games, and I do have a few like that I've tried that idea out, and I would definitely show, okay, you got this role, you needed that amount, and they say, okay, well, I didn't get it this time, but I at least I see, and I totally agree. You need to have that agency. If it's too random that you don't know why it fell that way, well, then you just think it maybe always falls that way, or that you had
Right.
no effect on the story.
Right.
It's the worst
Exactly.
thing.
No, tell me this. So, at a very high level with choice script, as I view it, choice script is always forcing you forward. So it's forcing you, you're in the scene and then you got to make a choice and that takes you to scene B. And then in scene B, you make some choices that takes you to scene, C or, or even location C. So you're always kind of moving forward through the story. Um, could choice script be set up where, okay, well, scene A is whatever, you're in your castle and, then you go do a mission in B and then you get to come back to your castle. Like, can you write it in a way that it's more like an open world than it is in a more linear kind of forward progressing storyline? Does it have that kind of coding capability?
You absolutely can. So you're right. I mean, that's sort of the style of the game is usually you have this pivotal moment, some choices, branches back, but then they sort of regroup back. But that isn't really so much in the nature even of the language, because you can recall a scene and just with a simple variable switch, you can send them off. There are procedures that you can use to revisit things. So again, referring to my work in progress folder, I have actually made a game and it was up in beta testing, and it was more of a proof of concept, Hero Daria. And you play as a much more traditional, kind of like the old Mud, where it's an open world. You can visit different places within the city and talk to different people and grow your skills, and right down to the combat being that random. So it has fully that options in there. I think because it's text based, most people they think, oh, it's text based. I've got to stick to story. This is meant to be story, and I think that's where I do differ. I'm told all the time, and I keep breaking the rules. You're not supposed to write a game that way. That is, and then I do it. Um, for good or for bad, I think some things work, some things don't. But absolutely, yes, you have the options. You can go and in fact, the one I'm writing right now, and it's in the middle of beta testing, is called Daria, a Kingdom Simulator. So it's going to bring us right back to the very beginning, but it's totally different. This isn't like your story where you're progressing forward. It's a resource management game. So a lot of stats, a lot of numbers, a lot of randomization in it. But and because of that, it's going to feel completely different. Day one, very small things happening. By the time you're up to day 30 and you're building that the forge to put a blacksmith in while you're defending yourself against the Laslonians and the Empire of Jalal who's coming at you, and you're still gaining some heroes that will fight at your side. So the options are there. It's just a matter of what you want to do with it.
Now, my understanding, you're doing all this coding, all this writing, all the storyline. This is all you 100%. It's a one-man show as of right now, and that again, not you're a full-time math teacher, and you're kind of doing this nights and weekends to, put out 8 games in 11 years, which I think is an amazing pace. You must be very, very busy.
It's a lot of fun. It's always been my hobby. So and I've told myself that too. I've said if I find myself writing and suddenly I'm dreading doing it, well, I'll stop, because it's a fun thing for me to do. And I was doing it before this. I mentioned I made a couple free ones, and even before that, I mentioned family makes you busy. You lose all your time.
Yeah.
So I loved Dungeons and Dragons. in playing games so much, I got onto the play by post or play by email, which was the totally text version where you are typing out all your character actions, and the DM is collating it and then retelling the story in posts. And so getting that text base, it's such a nice way to do it. And even with the Lost Heir, in a lot of ways, in the back of my head, it was like I make the games how I'd like to play a game, and to be able to play a game of well, Dungeons and Dragons or some other role playing game, you need a time to get with friends. You need time for the dungeon master to put the story together. So this gives you the option to basically solo play, which I think is just a fun way to do it.
So, the other part of this, obviously you do this for the love of it, first off, but on the back end, the business side of it, we talked about this a little. So if you kind of could recap this, how does it go into things like deciding to do a one-time purchase, and how do you determine this is a $4.99 game versus a $5.99 game? The business decision to work with hosted games, and they're going to give you services, but obviously that's going to cost you. So less is going into your pocket, and then it's got to go on a platform like Amazon or Google Play or whatever, and they're going to take a cut. So like, can you kind of talk a little bit of as much as you want about the business side of putting all of this out?
Sure. So that's right. So it's the games are pay to play, and then once you get it, it's yours, and that was always an important idea that I like. Actually, it is interesting. There's a whole story about Choice Script. In early on, they tried using an ad generated, ad revenue based, and they got. I'm trying to think the story how it went. Short story, they got removed from Google AdSense. I think it was that one, and because their fans were saying, "Oh yeah, this is a great game. This is a great game," and they were playing it, and it tripped a wire, and they thought that it was that people were running ads but not playing the game just because of the nature of the game. So they were removed from it. So we are totally pay based now. All that business end of things, it is up. I leave it with them. So some of the details are kind of interesting. Apple, Google, Amazon, they take 30% right off the top. That's just what they do. And then what's left, I get a percentage of that. So my percentage it's small. It just narrows down and down and down. It depends where you want to compare it to. Compared to a traditional book writer, a novelist, my percentage is quite large. Royalties from writing books are really small. If I were to go off on my own, I could definitely increase the amount that would come to me. But again, I'm doing this for fun, and I think if I were to do that, I'd have to get an Apple developer license. I'd have to get I don't even know how you get onto the Android stuff, so it would be a lot more into it. One other fun, nice thing about making money with games is my wife lets me write a lot more, and it sounds kind of funny, but it's true. If I'm playing a game for fun, I get a little. She lets me play.
Nothing's getting in the bank on that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but when the royalty check comes in, suddenly it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll let Mike write a little more this week, and maybe
I can take you out to dinner, honey.
That's right. So it's nice. It definitely. I mean, if you can, I think there's a saying that goes something with that. But if you can turn a hobby into making you a little bit of money, or turn it into a job, that's the dream. If you could. I can't quite. I still got to do that full-time job, but someday I'll retire, and I don't see myself ever stopping writing. I just enjoy it so much.
So, across your 8 games, like that first one, Life of a Wizard, like, does that still get downloads every month? Like, are you still making any, money off of that? Or is that, it's kind of like, no, really, it's just more like the recent games make money, and games that are 10 years old or 8 years old aren't really seeing any traction.
You're absolutely right. They definitely dwindle down. So yeah, so when it first comes out, when you get a game first released, there is a fairly long delay, a few months before while it's out, and then Apple collects the money, or whatever platform collects the money, and then it gets sent to Choice of Games, and then another month, and then the royalty checks start. So something like the old one, Life of a Wizard, yeah, it trickles in. I could the software for tracking the downloads has gotten way better over the years, and I get some really neat breakdowns. Although some of the other ones were neat, where you'd see the different countries and where they're playing. Now it's not a lot. I'm still working, still math teaching, so but it's definitely it's enough that it's noticeable, and it is kind of neat to see, and it's by then it is small amounts coming in on those original games. But to think, yeah, that's 11, well, 10 plus years. It'll be 11 years, I think, in February. So it's pretty neat to see those small amounts still trickling in. And with 8 games, I don't know how long that would last. If I were to stop writing today and never let out another new release, I think 5-10 years from now, I would still be getting a little bit, but it would be getting pretty small.
So it sounds like that they give you enough. It's not like a black box. It's like, you don't get a check and like, oh, here's $500 and you have no idea what game it is. It has a breakdown like, well, you sold 10 Life of the Wizards and 50 Life of the Monsters, and like it'll break down where that royalty check and which particular games are generating what money.
Yes. So which is actually, that's very much grown with the company too. When I started with Choice of Games, like I said, I recorded it once. I was like the 10th hosted game they released, something like that. So I was definitely one of the first ones that really started, well, one of the first ones that started taking off big. And with that, all the other stuff that came with it. So I'm sorry, I lost my track again. What was the question?
We were talking about the breakdown of the sales.
Breakdown. Yes. So when Choice Games first started, it did feel more black box. It really did. I remember with Life of a Wizard in particular, I had no idea. Like I said to my wife, I might get enough for maybe a case of beer. Wouldn't that be nice? Or maybe it would be enough that we would get to go somewhere, a little local vacation. And I had no idea. Now, as the years went on, their software got better. They started tracking things, and absolutely now I get a wonderful little royalty statement that will tell me of each of my 8 games, 8 different pages, each one of those, which platforms they sold on, and how many of each platform for the given period.
Oh, that's great. Of your 8 games, which right now is the best, has sold the most games?
Probably is Lost Heir 1. And the writing, yeah, I think so. Writing a trilogy it's a huge commitment, enormous commitment. But I think it really did expand me outwards, because once Lost Heir was out and a success, when Lost Heir 2 came out, the sales of Lost Heir 1 just totally rejuvenated. It was right back in full again. And then when all 3 were out, again, back to the old ones, they do that. And so, and even just the fans and readers who would start hanging on now more and be, when they were waiting for Lost Heir 2 and even more so waiting for Lost Heir 3, the amount of mail and the amount of email coming in saying, come on, where is it? What's going on with it? They were excited, which was nice.
Yeah, that's great. But now, as a text adventure game, it tends to just be kind of accessible because it's all text based. From your standpoint, was being an accessible game just a happy accident, or did you have to do things specifically to ensure that it was an accessible game?
So to be honest, it was a happy accident, but a very happy accident. I started finding out very early that this was such a good thing. And because my games are more game than story, at least I think so. It's always a balance. There's a lot of story in there too, but it gave a lot more options to be more accessible. We talked about this the other time too. When I first started writing these games, I don't think I'm a great writer or a great coder, but I think I'm fairly okay with both, which gave me this wonderful little niche. And then with that niche, I had the control over it all. So I could put in so much more game stuff that, well, there's not a lot of opportunities for a lot of the strategy building, gamey things. And because my writing is okay, well, good, but I was always told I'm a terse writer. That was the comment they kept throwing at me. Very short things.
I
But
like
that was the
efficient. You're an
intention.
efficient writer. That's what
I like that better. I'm an efficient writer, but because it's true, I didn't. I write the games the way I want to play them, and in all honesty, I'd play someone else's game, and I'd get a page. Oh, that's interesting. A second page. Okay. Third page. I'm bored. And I did. It was too much writing. I wanted to be able to get into it. So I have a personal little thing. I don't want to go more than, it's not a hard and fast limit, but about a couple paragraphs before I give out that choice. If I'm on to a page and a half of text, or even as soon as I have one little next page, I'm feeling a little antsy. If I put two next pages, this is 2 or 3 pages of text, I don't. By that point, unless I'm in a situation where I really need to deliver a lot of information, I'll try to get in something that for a choice. And I think that probably
if you go on
too.
3 pages without giving somebody a choice, then they don't feel like they have agency in the story. And the whole point is to, in a role playing game, is for you to role play. And what would you do, or what would you say if you go on 3 pages? You're not giving the person anything to do.
Exactly. And so having shorter amounts of writing with more choices, and then because I love the gaming aspect, more game options and more options to do things. I think it does just blend so well to be accessible, that it allows that so much more that you can do with it.
So I know you said you have a big work in progress folder. Have you settled in on one that's going to be game number 9?
I have. So game number 9 will be, I mentioned it briefly, Daria, a kingdom simulator. So it's completely different from, I dare say, anything else out there. But I don't. I like I like to write and I like to read interactive fiction. So I've probably, well, I've read some, but it's totally unique. It's not as this is, if some of my games have been too gamey or too story, this one is so much further into the game side of things. So from developing your units, resource management, right down to chopping wood, mining stone, mining copper, smelting copper and tin into bronze.
Is that all on choice script?
It's all in choice script again.
Okay.
So it will all be text. Now, we talked just before about not having too much information overload. Well, it's not going to be story wise, but it does get pretty heavy. But it's nice. It nicely builds. So it starts off you're just you and a couple people out there starting a king. Well, you're not having a kingdom yet, and it grows and it grows. So it becomes enormous. And I hope in a way.
How do you in a game like that track time? So like I know in some you can actually put in a 30-second timer that every 30 seconds actually kind of advances the round, so whatever you can get done in 30 seconds you can get done, or is each click of a button or to chop wood, all right, well that's what you did this round, now you're on to the next round. Like how are you advancing time through that simulation?
So in this one I'm going I sort of play with time. So it's even though this story starts with you literally with a couple of people out in a field with nothing, and you start gathering wood to make your axe, to make your wood, to make your house, to make your, it's that building. It really is. It has that feel, that resource management, that sort of bit like the old Civilization games, but because it has that slow build. So what I do is it's sleep. So what you can do all these things throughout a day, but you'll run out of stuff to do, and it's time to go to sleep. And now it's day 2, day 3.
Gotcha.
But those days are even to the point right in the story. I have fun with it, almost a joke. So what's one big thing you build? Well, the Academy of Wizards. So you have wizards, and they're using magic to raise this enormous tower, and it's it's defying the laws of physics. It's going to house thousands of people. It will be ready tomorrow. So it's a little silly, but the idea is that as a game, you'll be building, you're going to build an entire city, you're going to ally with nations or destroy them and start wars with them, but still it's day by day. So you might be day 50 and have done all this crazy things. So I do play with time that way.
When's that expected to come out?
I actually I mentioned this last, the one that we missed our record, and I haven't told anyone since. So you still get the exclusive.
All right. Exclusive the second time around.
That's right. So I've been offered the January slot. So I'm hoping that it will be January. So this I mentioned before we started this, that after our last week's session, well, actually last week when we talked, which was, I didn't mind, I didn't want to lose it, but it was nice to have a practice. That was kind of nice. I'm just, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I'm not really a public speaker. I'm a huge introvert. So so having the practice, this worked well for me. But I get nervous to talk with stuff. So
that's interesting. It's interesting you said you get the January slot. Is that how, like, does Choice Script control how many games come out in a month? So in every month 3 games come out and you get one of the slots?
So it's actually through Steam. Steam was the big thing. We weren't always on Steam. I'm not sure when we did now, 5 years ago, something like that. So Steam is a really interesting platform. It works a lot different than the others. With Apple, you make yourself an app, you put it up, they'll take a look at it for content, make sure you're not doing anything you shouldn't be. If it's good, it's up. But with Steam, if you're a new developer, they won't let you on. So they'll let you go for a trial. And so when Choice of Scripts started getting into the Steam market, they would only put their most successful games on because they were only given a few at a time.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure of exactly the logistics of this, if I'm right, but if they run their Choice of Games label and their Hosted Games label, so now they do have Steam on both, but with Hosted Games, you're not guaranteed to get in the Steam market. You need a bit of a track record because they only have so many slots. So when I say I'll be their January slot, that's for hosted games. So they sort of allot one slot per month for their what they hope to be the successful hosted games one, because they do get a lot of different games, and you'll find the quality of hosted games. It's wonderful for letting new developers get into it and make something, but it does mean that there's some things on there that aren't as the same quality of some of the others.
Sure. Well, I really thank you for doing this twice with me. So we've spent multiple hours together now. So I appreciate that, and appreciate you coming back so quickly to redo what was lost from a technical glitch last time. So I really do appreciate that. That's the first interview I've lost. So again, exclusive, multiple exclusive with you. So again, I thank you, so much for taking the time to speak with me, putting out a great game. I've really enjoyed, played the trilogy through 3 or 4 different times. Each time building a different character, trying to reach for those different specializations, and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed the agency I could create by the way that I developed my character. So for those who are really into RPG type of games and probably D&D, I think you'll see something you really like in the Lost Heir Trilogy. So definitely download that, check it out. I played Life of a Mobster again. That was a fun one. Again, felt like I was in the middle of a mobster movie, from the 1990s. And again, as I told you, the Space Force Life of a Space Force Captain is on my docket to play very soon. So I'm excited to see that one. So I would love to have you back, in January when you release your next game. If you want to come back on and give us a little sneak peek and talk about that game, I would love to have you back for a third time. And again, I really appreciate the time you've taken to speak with us today.
Well, absolutely. I'd love to come back. You're very easy to speak to. It's been fun. It's a good time to sit and talk games and things like that. So thank you very much.
We're trying to just make it very, very conversational. It's just there's no hard no hard questions here. It's just tell us about your game. Tell us about your passion. So usually these come across pretty conversational for people.
Excellent. Well, it's been fun. It's been fun talking to you. Absolutely. I like doing it.
You as well. Thanks very much.